Hi there, my name is Brenna, and I wanted to speak about being Asian Canadian. I want to be open, share my experiences and stories of being an Asian Canadian. Recently, I've discovered what's called the Asian tag, created by a YouTuber named Amy Lee. It's specifically known as the Asian American tag, but I'm from Canada. But I think that being a minority in any country has its issues, which I wanted to share and talk about. My goal is to spread awareness and maybe educate people and perhaps have some debates. So part of this Asian tag is a list of various questions which I will be answering. Which ethnicity are you? I am Chinese Canadian. Which generation are you? I'm not too sure which generation I classify under because of my background story. So I was born in China, Jiangxi, and I only lived there for 9 months until I was adopted and brought to Canada where I was raised. So I did some research, and according to a sociology professor named Ruben Rembalt, I don't think I'm saying that right, from an article I found from his work, I would classify under what is known as the 1.75 generation, since I arrived to Canada with zero memory of my native country while in my early stages of life, and I naturally adapted to the environment and my surroundings. Another key aspect of my generation classification is it's in between China's one-child policy, which began in 1980 and ended in 2016. This era completely violated human rights. Women were taken and had to forcibly get abortions. Fetuses were left in trash cans, streets, farms, everywhere. Most families only wanted to conceive boys instead of girls because they believed that they would provide more support for the family in the future. In my story, my biological mother left me in a basket with my birth certificate, and I was found by an officer who brought me to an orphanage. There is a documentary on Amazon Prime called One Child Nation that is extremely informative and impactful that you can watch to learn more about that. The first time I felt different or like a minority. So I live in a small, predominantly white town. So I just grew up knowing that I was Chinese, and I didn't think it was weird or anything. But the first time I saw it as a negative thing was in grade 3 on my first day at a new school, and this student came up to me and he stuck up his pinky finger in my face and he asked me, he said like, "Oh, does this mean the middle finger, but in China?" And I didn't know what to say. I kind of just thought like, why would he ask me this? That's probably one of the moments that I viewed myself as different, because he said that I would know because I was Chinese. I vaguely remember it, but I just know that he was asking me that because I was Chinese, which meant that I was different, because he didn't ask anybody else. He asked me because I was Chinese. I was the different one. Another first experience that made me feel different was people, or like kids, would make mocking Asian accents to me, and that also didn't make much sense to me. I think it's because I spoke English, so I didn't really get that. And this joke in elementary school was always told to me like, "Oh, how are you going to name your kids? By throwing pots and pans down a flight of stairs?" A lot of kids also would come up to me and stretch their eyes, which I didn't really get as a kid because I didn't think my eyes were different until people were doing that and pointing it out. And the way they did it made it seem like it was a bad thing. And now, in like our modern day, the fact that society turned that racist bullying tactic into a trend was kind of aggravating to me, and I'm sure to those who were also bullied that way, because they were bullied for being different from what society portrayed as normal, and they were just bullied for being different. Me experiencing those things are what made me feel different, or at least it was the start of it. I hope this makes sense, but I didn't feel like a minority until the people around me and society portrayed me as a minority. Were you always proud of your heritage, or was there a time you rejected it? I just knew I was Chinese, and that was that. I never really had a time where I rejected it. It was just something that made me feel different, and I continue to struggle with it today, but I'm trying to get better, and I am accepting of who I am, and I actually want to learn more about my Chinese culture. However, I see myself as Canadian as well because I was raised here my whole life, and no one can ever tell me that I am not a Canadian. What are some stereotypes that you struggle with? A stereotype that was prevalent a lot in my life was having to be good at math just because I was Asian. I'm terrible at math. I failed grade 9 math. And when I mean, like, I had to be good at math, it's not that I felt that I had to be good at math. It's just that when, like, everyone knew I was bad at it in my class, and they would always point out that I should be good at it because I was Asian. I would constantly get comments like, aren't Asians supposed to be good at math? I think that a main reason why people do stereotype Asians for that is because China has a much different education system and more pressure from families for their kids to do better, but people don't really understand that or take that into consideration. I got the "do you eat dog" comment a lot. I can't remember where I learned this, but China has a lot of poverty issues, and years ago when food was more scarce, people had to turn to eating dogs for survival. In recent years, the majority of Asians do not eat dog because there's no need to, but some do, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with that because cultures have different food preferences. Like, I would not eat a dog, but I wouldn't judge somebody for eating a dog, you know? There is an excellent TED Talk video by Canwin. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but it is called "I Am Not Your Asian Stereotype" that explains the struggles of Asian stereotype. She talks about people asking, "Where are you from?" but then asking, "But where are you really from?" which I've also experienced to the point where I thought it was normal. So when people ask, I just give them my whole life story, like the whole layout, which I shouldn't do because I don't need to explain myself and people don't need to know that unless, like, it depends on the context, but yeah. I grew up with these and many other stereotypes and discrimination, and as I understood them more, I would stand up for myself and be told that I was overreacting or being too sensitive, which is definitely not the case. Can I speak Cantonese or Mandarin? No, I cannot, but I did try to learn, but it was really hard and I just gave up, and I don't think I could do it, to be honest. How do you feel about your heritage now? Do you identify with it? Growing up, I didn't feel like I fit in with my friends because I was the only Asian. I think there was one other Asian guy in my school, and with myself, I didn't feel like I was a real Asian, which is something that I struggled with a lot, but not anymore. I just felt like I was in the middle, but now I am more accepting and comfortable with who I am. In the TED Talk I mentioned earlier, the speaker says, "For the longest time, my identity had formed around the fact that I was different," which is a statement that I relate to a lot growing up and even now, because I feel like, I'm constantly reminded that I'm different. I'm trying to dismiss it because I know that I am Canadian. I know that just because I'm a different race doesn't mean I am different from my friends, only in ways that I have experienced racism or stereotyping, assumptions, and discriminatory acts, which is just stupid, but it still affects me, and it makes me feel like a minority. But there are some people who have good intentions and don't mean to be racist by saying stereotypical assumptions and all that, but like I said, it still affects me. I accept that I am Chinese and I want to learn and assimilate myself into the culture, traditions, and the food because I feel like that part of me is Canadian and it'll always be Canadian, but another part of me is my Asian culture, which I want to start learning about more. What is your favorite thing about being Asian American or Canadian or your heritage? I have no idea. I feel like I have to surround myself around my Chinese side more and learn about it to really understand what it means. Now I just want to share some more stories that are both amusing and have a deeper meaning below the surface on racism against Asians. I believe that Asian racism is normalized and it needs to change, and I think that the rise of Asian hate due to COVID-19, people are becoming more aware of it and understanding, which is why I wanted to share this. In elementary school, we were taught what's called WITS, which stands for Walk Away, Ignore It, Talk It Out, and Seek Help. This acronym didn't do shit for anybody. It was supposed to help and prevent bullying, but it did nothing. So, when I was getting bullied or teased or anything like that, I would tell them to stop a couple times, and if they continued, then I would resort to violence, which was a lot more effective. It made people stop, and it was better than just ignoring it, doing nothing, or getting a teacher to make them say sorry only for them to do it again. In middle school, this guy came up to me during lunch and he started teasing me, and then he started yelling in my face. So I started walking back to my locker, and he started stepping on the back of my shoes and making mocking Asian accents, and I turned around and I swung my lunch kit at him after telling him to stop. But he just kept following me around, even when I went outside for recess, and he just kept making mocking accents, and then he started stretching his eyes. So I turned around and I flipped his hat off, and he told me off, and then he punched me in the face. The same guy who did that, I remember in elementary school, he would sing this song. It was like Me Chinese, and then something about a butt. I had a couple other kids to do that to me too, but yeah. So I work at a grocery store, and so many racist things have happened. The first time something like that happened was, so there were two guys circling around the area I was working, and I just could sense that something was not right. So they came up to me and they started to ask me questions about work, and then it turned into the typical, where are you from? No, but where are you really from? And then they said, I've never seen an Asian in this town. You're like the first one we've seen. How do I respond to that? So then one of them said, oh, do you also work at the nail salon at the front of the store? I just blankly stared at them. I didn't say a word. And then they asked, can we have your number or your Snapchat or something? I said no, and they asked me if I was sure. Yeah, I'm pretty damn sure. I've had multiple customers, approach me and ask if I speak English. One customer actually came up to me and said, Ni hao, do you speak English? I had this one guy come up to me, and he was speaking to me extremely slow, but I wasn't judging or anything, but he said, do you know where spoons are? At first, I thought, I don't know, maybe he had some kind of illness or something like that. But then he started to say it again, slower, and he was gesturing, using one hand to act as a bowl and the other as a spoon. And then he says, you know spoons used to eat with? When I responded in perfect English, he started to speak fluently as well. So that was pretty interesting. This older guy came up to me and he asked, are you from here? Yes, I said. Really? Yeah. He said, I've lived here for 7 years and I've never seen an Asian. I was just flustered and I said, oh, well, I've lived here my whole life. Really? He said. That's amazing. Well, how am I supposed to respond to that? I'm glad my existence amazes you? What? And then after he told me he grew up in the city and saw a lot of diversity there, but never here in our small town, which I understood, but that's a situation where I'm reminded that I'm different. I don't think those comments are necessary, and I don't think people understand what it feels like, or at least many people, or people who say those kinds of things. I went to the mall one time with some friends, and a group of Asians passed by, and an old friend said to me, "Oh, look, that's where you belong." That comment made me feel so different and like I didn't belong, and it was just really shitty. So that comment made me feel like I didn't belong. So then in high school, we had a lot of Asian exchange students who I ended up making friends with. However, my mindset was that becoming friends with Asian exchange students would make me feel a sense of belonging. And for some time it did, but in the end, it only made me feel more different. They would be able to speak their language and I didn't understand. They would know all about their culture and the amazing food, which I didn't. Like, for example, the mall. When I go to the mall, I see it as me getting Chinese food from the places, but to them, it's fake food. It's disgusting. That's just a minor example, though. They would tell me things like, "Your English is so good." I didn't see it as a negative comment, but it was just different. Something that they told me a lot too was, "You're so skinny." They would say that back in their home country they were skinny, and when they came to Canada they gained so much weight. I didn't take these comments personally. It just made me realize that it didn't matter who I hung out with, and that I shouldn't feel different because of my ethnicity. One summer, I went to a small convenience store, and the cashier said to me, "So, you're staying here for the summer?" I was just confused, and I said yes. And then she said, "When are you going back home?" And then I realized she thought I was an exchange student, so I told her I lived here, and she said, "Oh, that's why your English is so good." I learned to play the piano when I was growing up, and I played hockey as well. The statement came from older generations, but when I would say that, they would say things like, "That's an odd mix for a Chinese girl." Sure, music and sports are different categories, but I didn't see it as anything out of the ordinary or have any relation to my race. COVID has created an outbreak in Asian racism and hate crimes. The fact that people are blaming a whole race for a pandemic is ridiculous. I've heard whispers behind my back of people saying, "How does it feel to start a pandemic?" or "COVID spreader." Now, hearing stories of elderly being beaten, people being spat on, and racial slurs is terrifying. I find I've developed a lot of paranoia and anxiety when I go out in public or to work. Like I said before, I feel like Asian racism is so normalized, and not even just today, like in our prehistory. So many voices were silenced, starting from when Chinese Canadians were forced to build railroads, taken advantage of in the war, Japanese internment camps, and the head tax, all of those things. There was this video I found on YouTube called Canadian Chinese Heroes Force 136, and it is a very amazing video that I would recommend watching. I think it is important to talk about these issues and create awareness and share stories, which is why I'm making this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to comment or DM me on Instagram. I am very open to having any kind of conversation to what I said or anything related. Thank you for listening and have a great day.